Okay, so we are live. All right. So let me just check if everything is working fine and then we will begin. ठीक है, चीज़ें सही चल रही हैं, ऑडियो वीडियो सही है और बाकी चीज़ें भी सही हैं. Okay, so we can start in a while. Let me pin my message. Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. ठीक है, तो हम पढ़ रहे हैं ये बुक जिसका नाम है ईगो इज़ द एनिमी. ठीक है, तो ईगो इज़ द एनिमी बुक है. हमने इसका कल प्रोलॉग स्टार्ट कर लिया था. ऑलमोस्ट हमने थोड़ा बहुत कवर भी कर लिया है. तो हम हैं अभी पेज नंबर 17 में. वी आर एट द पेज नंबर 17 आउट ऑफ 168. राइट. ठीक है, तो आगे चलते हैं. आज मैं क्रोम के अलावा इसमें मैंने कहीं और खुला हुआ है PDF. माइक्रोसॉफ्ट एज में खुला हुआ है मैंने, तो थोड़ा सा चीज़ें अलग होंगी मेरे लिए, तो फिगर आउट करने में थोड़ा सा बीच में टाइम लग सकता है, बट इट इज़ फाइन. इट इज़ व्हाट इट इज़. ओके, लेट्स जस्ट बिगिन. राइट, लेट्स जस्ट बिगिन. इनकेपेबल और ओके, जस्ट गिव मी 1 सेकेंड. इसकी थिकनेस थोड़ी सी बढ़ा दी जाए. ओके. हाँ. इनकेपेबल और incapable of or uninterested in hearing from the outside source. We can't recognize opportunities or create them if instead of seeing what is in front of us, we live inside our own fantasy without an accurate accounting of our own abilities to compare to others. What we have is not confidence but delusion. How are we supposed to reach, motivate or lead others? मैंने ज़्यादा ही thickness बढ़ा दिया यार. Changes. How are we supposed to reach, motivate, or lead other people if we can't relate to their needs because we have lost touch with our own? Okay, the performance artist Marina Abramovic puts it directly: if you start believing in your greatness, it is the death of your creativity. If you start बिलीविंग इन योर ग्रेटनेस, इट इज़ द डेथ ऑफ योर क्रिएटिविटी. देखो, कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं है यहाँ पे. ओवर कॉन्फिडेंस से रिलेटेड चीज़ों के बारे में बात की गई है. ठीक है, कॉन्फिडेंस होना बहुत ज़रूरी है, बट जब आपको लगता है कि आप बहुत ज़्यादा महान हो, ठीक है, तो वो आपकी क्रिएटिव साइड को, like, it is the death of your creativity is what author is trying to say. All right, so the name of the book is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, and we are at the page number 17. I'm repeating it again because I can see certain people are joining for the first time. So just one thing keeps ego around: comfort. Okay, pursuing great work, whether it is in sports or art or business, is often terrifying. Ego suits that fear. It's a salve to that insecurity, replacing the rational and aware parts of our psyche with bluster and self absorption. Ego tells us what we want to hear, what we want to hear it, when we want to hear it. But it is a short term fix with a long term consequence. Ego was always there, now it's emboldened. Okay. Now more than ever, our culture fans the flames of ego. It has never been easier to talk, to puff ourselves up. We can brag about our goals to millions of our fans and followers, things only rock stars and cult leaders used to have. We can follow and interact with our idols on Twitter. We can read books and sites and watch TED Talks, drink from a firehouse of inspiration and validation like never before. There is an app for that as well. We can name ourselves CEO of our exist only on paper company. We can announce big news on social media and let the congratulations roll in. We can publish articles about ourselves in outlets that used to be sources of objective journalism. Some of us do this more than others, but it's only a matter of degree. Besides the change in technology, We are told to believe in our uniqueness above all else. We are told to think big, live big, to be memorable, and dare greatly. We think that success requires a bold vision or some sweeping plan. After all, that's what the founders of this company or that championship team supposedly had. But did they? Did they really? We see risk taking swagger and people believe in the media and eager for our own successes. Try to reverse engineer the right attitude, the right pose. That is true, right? सक्सेसफुल होने के बाद आदमी कुछ भी बोल दे लोग उस पर विश्वास कर लेते हैं एंड वैसे भी सक्सेसफुल नहीं भी है अगर सोशल मीडिया में स्पेशली जो एल्डर जनरेशन है जैसे मैं अपने पेरेंट्स को देखता हूँ उनको लगता है सोशल मीडिया में जितनी चीज़ें हैं वो सब सही है एआई भी आ चुका है एआई आने से पहले भी लोग अटरली कुछ भी बोल रहे होते थे सोशल मीडिया पे बट हम कभी क्रॉस चेक नहीं करते राइट तो सोशल मीडिया इज़ जस्ट अ प्लेटफॉर्म वेयर वी आर जस्ट गोइंग फॉर एंटरटेनमेंट मेनली आई एम सेइंग क्योंकि हो सकता है आप बाकी रीजन से भी जा रहे हो बट मेनली एंटरटेनमेंट के लिए जाया जाता है फिर वहाँ पे ऐसा कंटेंट है हम उसको वेरीफाई भी नहीं करते हैं और हम उस पर बिलीव भी कर देते हैं सो नीदर वी आर verifying the content is correct or no and on top of that we are accepting whatever is offered in front of us right we are just agreeing to it right so that's the thing that author is also trying to emphasize on we intuit a casual relationship that isn't there we assume the symptoms of success are the same as success itself and in our naivete confuse the byproduct with the cause sure ego has worked for some. Many of history's most famous men and women were notoriously egotistical, but so were many of its greatest failures, far more of them. In fact, but here we are with a culture that urges us to roll the dice, to make the gamble, ignoring the stakes. Wherever you are, ego is too. जहाँ भी आप हो वहाँ ego भी है. At any given time in life, people find themselves at one of three stages. We have aspiring to something, trying to make a dent in the universe. We have achieved success, perhaps a little, perhaps a lot, or we have failed recently or continually. Most of us are in these stages in a fluid sense. We are aspiring until we succeed. We succeed until we fail or until we aspire to more. And after we fail, we can begin to aspire or succeed again. Ego is the enemy every step along this way. In a sense, ego is the enemy of building, of maintaining, and of recovering. When things come fast and easy, this might be fine. But in times of change, of difficulty, and therefore the three parts of that this book is organized into aspire, success and failure. अभी जब हमने स्टार्टिंग में आज नहीं शायद कल हमने देखा था कि जब हम इसमें देख रहे थे कि क्या क्या कंटेंट है तो तीन पार्ट में मेनली डिवाइड किया गया है जिसके अपने सब पार्ट्स भी हैं बट तीन जो मेन पार्ट है पहला है एस्पायर फिर सक्सेस फिर फेलियर तो इन चीज़ों के बारे में बात की गई है इस बुक में रिलेटेड टू ईगो आई थिंक राइट द एम ऑफ दैट स्ट्रक्चर इज सिंपल टू हेल्प यू सप्रेस ईगो अर्ली बिफोर bad habits take hold, to replace the temptations of ego with humility and discipline. Firuza Khatun, welcome to the live stream. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Alright, when we experience success and to cultivate strength and fortitude so that when fate turns against you, you are not racked by failure. In short, it will help us be humble in our aspirations, gracious in our success, resilient in our failures. तो ये इस बुक का एम है कि जब हम एस्पिरेशन एस्पायर कर रहे हैं किसी चीज़ को अचीव करने का तो उस टाइम पे हम हम्बल रहें जब हमको सक्सेस मिल जाए तो उस टाइम पे हम ग्रेसियस रहें और अगर फेलियर्स हैं तो उस टाइम पे हम रेजिलियंट रहें ठीक है सो दैट्स व्हाट दी बुक is all about according to author. This is not to say that you are not unique and that you don't have anything or something amazing to contribute in your short time on this planet. This is not to say that there is not room to push past creative boundaries, to invent, to feel inspired, or to aim for truly ambitious change and innovations. On the contrary, in order to properly do these things and take these risks, we need balance. As the Quaker William Penn observed, buildings that lie so exposed to the weather need a good foundation. Very true, very true. This book you hold in your hands is written around one optimistic assumption. Your ego is not some power you are focused to satiate at every turn. It can be managed, it can be directed. In this book, we'll look at individuals like William Sermon, Catherine Graham, and Jackie Robinson, Eleanor Roosevelt, Bill Walsh, Benjamin Franklin, Bella Sirius, and Angela Merkel, and George C. Marshall. Could they have accomplished what they accomplished? So they all are like, these are all the great people who have got success in their life. All right, saving faltering companies, advancing the art of war, integrating baseball, revolutionizing football offense, standing to tyranny, bravely bearing misfortune. If ego had left them ungrounded and self observed, it was their sense of reality and awareness, one that the author and strategist Robert Greene once said, "We must take to like a spider in its web." That was the that was at the core of their great art, great writing, great design, great business, great marketing, and great leadership. What we find when we study these individuals is that they were grounded, circumspect, and unflinchingly real. Not they any of them were wholly without ego. ठीक है. हाँ, एक चीज़ ये भी नहीं माननी है कि इनमें ईगो होता ही नहीं है, ऐसा भी नहीं कह रहे हैं. तो ईगो एग्जिस्ट करता है, बट उसको जिस लेवल तक हम कम कर सके उस लेवल तक हम उसको कम करने की कोशिश करें, इज व्हाट द ऑथर इज ट्राइंग टू से इन दिस बुक, राइट. बट दे न्यू हाउ टू सप्रेस इट, चैनल इट, सब्ज्यूम इट व्हेन इट काउंटेड. ठीक है, तो सिर्फ सप्रेस नहीं करना है, चैनल भी कर सकते हैं, सब्ज्यूम भी कर सकते हैं व्हेन इट इज काउंटेड. They were great yet humble. Great yet humble. Wait, but so and so had a huge ego and was successful. But what about Steve Jobs? What about Kanye West? We can seek to rationalize the worst behavior by pointing to outliers. But no one is truly successful because they are delusional, self absorbed, or disconnected. Even if these traits are correlated or associated with certain well known individuals, so are a few others: addiction, abuse of themselves and others, depression, mania. In fact, what we see when we study these people is that they did their best work in the moments when they fought back against these impulses, disorders, and flaws. Only when free of ego and baggage can anyone perform to their utmost. For this reason, we are also going to look at individuals like Howard Hughes, the Persian king Xerxes, John DeLorean, Alexander the Great, and the many cautionary tales of others who lost their grip on reality and in the process made it clear what a gamble ego can be. We'll look at the costly reasons they learned and the price they paid in misery and self destruction. We'll look at how often even the most successful people vacillate between humility and ego and the problems these causes. When we remove ego, we are left with what is real. What it places ego is humility, yes, but rock hard humility and confidence. Whereas ego is artificial, this type of confidence can hold weight. Ego is stolen, confidence is earned. Ego is self anointed, it's swagger, it is artifice. One is girding yourself, the other gaslighting. It's the difference between potent and poisonous. As you'll see in the pages that follows, the self-confidence took an unassuming and under- underestimated general and turned him into America's foremost warrior and strategist during the Civil War. Ego took a different general from the height of power and influence after the same war and drove him to destitution and ignominy. One took a quiet, sober German scientist and made her not a new kind of leader but a force for peace. The other took two different but equally brilliant and bold engineering minds of the 20th century and built them up with a whirlwind of hype and celebrity before dashing their hopes against the rocks of failure, bankruptcy, scandal, and insanity. One guided one of the most one of the worst teams in NFL history to the Super Bowl in 3 seasons, and one then on to be one of most dominant dynasties in the game. Meanwhile, countless other coaches. That's that's your main concern, Funky. Okay, I can only laugh to this statement. All right, politicians, entrepreneurs, and writers have overcome similar odds only to succumb to the more inevitable probability of handing the top spot right back to someone else. Some learn humility, some choose ego, some are prepared for the a fate, both positive and negative. Others are not. Which will you choose? Who will you be? You have picked up this book because you sense that you'll need to answer this question eventually, consciously or not. Well, here we are. Let's get to it. So, basically, this is the end of the prologue, and yeah, this is the more like a context to what the book is going to be about. Now, we are moving to the actual content of this book, and we are at the part one, that is Aspire. All right, do I need to zoom in a bit? All right, thank you for the advice, brother. We'll see how things turn out to be in future. Thank you so much for the advice. And I hope you're having a great career in America. All the very best for your future endeavors. All right, Aspire. Here we are sitting out to do something. We have a goal, a calling, a new beginning. Every great journey begins here. Yet far too many of us never reach our intended destination. Ego, more often than not, is the culprit. We build ourselves up with fantastical stories. We pretend we have it all figured out. We let our star burn bright and hot only to fizzle out, and we have no idea why. These are the symptoms of ego, for which humility and reality are the cure. To whatever you aspire, ego is your enemy. Alright, we'll start with this quote or like statement by Adam Smith. He's a bold surgeon, they say, whose hand does not tremble when he performs an operation upon his own person, and he is often equally bold, who does not hesitate to pull off the mysterious veil of self delusion which covers from his view the deformities of his own conduct. Alright, let's see. Sometimes around the year, so from here, the actual book is getting started, alright. Sometimes around the year 374 BC, Isocrates, one of the most well known teachers and rhetoricians in Athens, wrote a letter to a young man named Demiscus. Isocrates had been a friend of the boy's recently deceased father and wanted to pass on to him some advice on how to follow his father's example. The advice ranged from practical to moral, all communicated in what Isocrates described as noble maxims. They were, as he put it, precepts for the years to come. Like many of us, Democritus was ambitious, which is why Isocrates wrote him because the path of ambitions can be dangerous. Isocrates began by informing the young man that no adornment so becomes you as modesty, justice, and self-control. For these are the virtues by which, as all men are agreed, the character of the young is held in restraint. Practice self control, he said, warning Damascus not to fall under the sway of temper, pleasure, and pain, and abhor flatters as you would deceivers. For both, if trusted, injure those who trust them. ठीक है, तो जो बेसिकली आप बोल सकते हो कि फ्लैटरी भी करते हैं ना, जैसे अगर आप इस सर्टेन पॉइंट रीच करोगे अपनी लाइफ में, जैसे कुछ सक्सेस की लैडर को जब आप क्लाइम करोगे, कहीं पेडेस्टल पे आप पहुंचोगे, तो आपके आसपास बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग होंगे जो फ्लैटरी पे विश्वास करते हैं, चापलूसी बोलते हैं जिसको हिंदी में, राइट। एंड दूसरे तरीके के लोग होते हैं जो धोखा देते हैं, डिसीवर्स। तो बोल रहे हैं यहाँ पे ये एडवाइस दिया आइसोक्रेट्स ने डेमेंस्कस को कि इन दोनों को ही एक ही तरीके से ट्रीट करना, इन दोनों से ही दूर रहना बेसिकली, राइट। क्योंकि अगर दोनों में से किसी पे भी आप ट्रस्ट करते हो तो लाइक तुमको इंजरी होगी, नॉट फिजिकल बट It can be of any kind, right? It can injure those who trust them. तो जो भी इन पे विश्वास करते हैं उनको ये आप बोल सकते हो कि इंजर करते हैं, उनको हार्म करते हैं इन सम सेंस. फ्लैटरर्स एंड डिसीवर्स, तो दोनों को आपने लाइक बोल सकते हो कि डिस्कार्ड करना है इन सम सेंस. You wanted him to be affable in your relations with those who approach you, okay, and never haughty. For the pride of the arrogant, even slaves can hardly endure, and be slow in deliberation, but the prompt to carry out your resolves. And that the best thing which we have in ourselves is good judgment. Constantly train your intellect, he told him. For the greatest thing in the smallest compass is sound mind in a human body. Sound mind in a human body, and that's what I'm heading for basically. That's why I'm reading these different kind of books so that I can get a new perspective, right? Some of this advice might sound similar or familiar because it made its way over the next 2000 years to William Shakespeare, who often warned about ego run amok. In fact, in Hamlet, using this very letter as his model, Shakespeare puts Isocrates' words in the mouth of his character Polonius in a speech to his son. Let's the speech, if you happen to have heard it, wraps up with this little verse. This above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing season this is thee. As it happened, Shakespeare's word also made their way to young United States military officer named William Sherman, who would go on to become perhaps this country's greatest general and strategic thinker. He may never have heard of Isocrates, but he loved the play and often quoted this very speech. Like Demetrius, Sherman's father died when he was very young. Like Demetrius, he was taken under the wing of a wise older man, in this case Thomas Ewing, a soon to be US Senator and friend of Sherman's father, who adopted the young boy and raised him as his own. What's interesting about Sherman is that despite his connected father, almost no one would have predicted much more than reasonable accomplishments, least of all that he would one day need to take the unprecedented step of refusing the presidency of the United States. Unlike a Napoleon who burst upon the scene from nowhere and disappears in failure just as quickly, Sherman's ascent was a slow and gradual one. He spent his early years at West Point and then in the army. For his first few years in service, Sherman traversed nearly the entire United States on horseback, slowly learning with each posting. As the rumblings of civil war broke out, Sherman made his way east to volunteer his services, and he was shortly put to use at the Battle of Bull Run, a rather disastrous Union defeat. Benefiting from a dire shortage of leadership, Sherman was promoted to brigadier general and was summoned to meet with President Lincoln and his top military advisor. On several occasions, Sherman freely strategized and planned with the president, but at the end of his trip, he made one strange request. He'd accept his new promotion only with the assurance that he'd not have to assume superior command. Would Lincoln give him his word on that? With every other general asking for as much rank and power as possible, Lincoln happily agreed. At this point in time, Sherman felt more comfortable as a number two. He felt he had an honest appreciation for his own abilities and that this role best suited him. Imagine that, an ambitious person turning down a chance to advance in responsibilities because he actually wanted to be ready for them. Is that really so crazy? Not that Sherman was always the perfect model of restraint and order. Early in the war, tasked with defending the state of Kentucky with insufficient troops, his mania and tendency to doubt himself combined in a wicked way. Ranting and raving about being undersupplied, unable to get out of his own head, paranoid about enemy movements, he broke form and spoke injudiciously injudiciously to several newspaper reporters. In the ensuing controversy, he was temporarily recalled from his command. It took weeks of rest for him to recover. It was one of a few nearly catastrophic moments in his otherwise steadily ascendant career. It was after this brief stumble, having learned from it, that Sherman truly made his mark. For instance, during the siege of Fort Donelson, Sherman technically held a senior rank at General S. Grant, while the rest of Lincoln's generals fought amongst themselves for personal power and recognition. Sherman waived his rank, choosing to cheerfully support and reinforce Grant instead of issuing orders. This is your so, Sherman told him in a note accompanying a shipment of supplies. Call upon uh, me for any assistance I can provide. Together, they won one of the Union's first victories in the war. Building on his successes, German began to advocate for his famous March to the Sea, a strategically bold and audacious plan, not born out of some creative genius but rather relying on the exact topography he had scouted and studied as a young officer in what had then seemed like a pointless backwater outpost. Where Sherman had once been cautious, he was now confident. But unlike so many others who possess great ambition, he earned this opinion, as he carved a path from Chattanooga to Atlanta, Chattanooga, okay, and then Atlanta to the sea. He avoided traditional battle after traditional battle. Any student of military history can see how the exact same invasion, driven by ego instead of a strong sense of purpose, would have had a far different ending. His realism allowed him to see a path through the South that others thought impossible. His entire theory of maneuver warfare rested on deliberately avoiding frontal assaults or shows of strength in the form of pitched battles and ignoring criticism designed to bait a reaction. He paid no notice and stuck in the plan. By the end of the war, Sherman was one of the most famous men in America, and yet he sought no public office, had no taste for politics, and wished simply to do his job and then eventually retire, dismissing the incessant praise and attention endemic to such success. He wrote a warning to his friend Grant: be natural and yourself, and this glittering flattery will be as the passing breeze of the sea on a warm summer day. One of Sherman's biographers summarized the man and his unique accomplishment in a remarkable passage. It is why he serves as our model in this phase of our ascent. Among men who rise to fame and leadership, two types are recognizable: those who are born with a belief in themselves and those in whom it is a slow growth dependent on actual achievement. I think I'm in the second category. To the men of the last type, their own success is a constant surprise, and its fruits the more delicious, yet to be tasted cautiously with a haunting sense of doubt whether it is not all a dream. In that doubt lies true modesty, not the sham of ins- inse- insecure self deprecation, but the modesty of moderation. In the Greek sense, it is poise, not pose. One must ask, if you believe in yourself is not dependent on actual achievement, then what is it dependent on? The answer, too often when we are just seeing out, is nothing. Ego. And this is why we so often see precipitous rises following by Camus falls. So, which type of person will you be? Like all of us, Sermon had to balance talent and ambition and intensity, especially when he was young. His victory in this struggle was largely why he was able to manage the life altering success that eventually came his way. This probably all sounds strange, where Isocrates and Shakespeare wished us to be self contained, self motivated, and ruled by principle. Most of us have been trained to do the opposite. Our cultural values almost try to make us dependent on validation, entitled, and ruled by our emotions. For a generation, parents and teachers have focused on building up everyone's self esteem. From there, the themes of our gurus and public figures have been almost exclusively aimed in inspiring, encouraging, and assuring us that we can do whatever we set our minds to. In reality, this makes us weak. Yes, you, with all your talent and promise as a boy wonder or a girl who's going places, we take it for granted that you have promise. It's why you have landed in the prestigious university you now attend, why you have secured the funding you have for your business, why you have been hired or promoted, why whatever opportunity you now have has fallen into your lap. As Irving Berlin put it, talent is only the starting point. The question is, will you be able to make the most out of it? Or will you be your own worst enemy? Will you snuff out the flame that is just getting going? Cool. Alright, so let's keep it till here. It's too hot in here. I will have to change my clothes and everything. I'll be back soon. So we are at page number 28 out of 168. This book is Ego is the Enemy, and it is by Ryan Holiday. This is Boastful Indian. If you have interest in such content, then you can subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Universe. Thank you so much, Radharanji. Have fun. Peace out.